Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We had a little bit of a Zoom glitch this morning, but we got it just in time. So hopefully you guys all got on just in time as well. Thanks for joining us again. Hopefully you were at our last session, Resolving Common Problematic Behaviors in Dogs and Cats, Part 1. If not, it's been recorded and is on the Assisi website. So I do invite you to check that out. Today's Part 2. And so let's go ahead and get started. Of course, I always want to start by thanking Assisi Animal Health, a wonderful company that cares about animals, and my greatest pleasure to introduce and talk about the Calmer Canine, which is a tool that's really shown promise to help dogs with separation anxiety and other anxieties. And I'm just really excited about this product, but I'm also excited about these little webbies, and I'm glad to participate. So thanks for joining us today. So you guys know from the shelter field that behavior problems are the #1 reason for owner relinquishment. And so it's really super important that you understand how to help people resolve behavior problems that they might be experiencing with their dogs or cats, because it can help prevent relinquishment. And that's always going to be our #1 thing. The best thing for the animals is that they don't end up in the shelter. So if we can help people before they reach that point, then we can really reduce surrenders and really help create more positive bonds with people, because it's that loss of the bond that's due to the behavior problem that often leads to the relinquishment. So real important for you guys to learn this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start today talking about some of the common problematic behaviors in cats. The last session, part 1, I covered inappropriate elimination and destructive scratching. I welcome you to go back and watch that webinar if you didn't tune in. Today, I'm going to talk about these other 3, urine marking or spraying, aggression to humans, and aggression to other cats. So let's start with urine marking or spraying. Now, the thing about urine marking is that it is a normal, purposeful cat behavior. It is not an abnormal behavior. You know, people just hate this behavior because who wants their stuff smelling like cat urine? But to the cat, it's just normal behavior. And they usually urine mark because of territorial behavior. Cats are super territorial. And so urine is one way that they mark their territory. Now, urine marking doesn't always involve spraying, which is what you see in the picture, where the cat backs up to an object and sprays their urine out on a vertical surface. Urine marking can also occur on a horizontal surface. And so sometimes we might not think it's spraying or urine marking because it's on a horizontal surface. And so we always have to rule out all those other things we talked about last time for inappropriate elimination. Is the cat just not using the litter box, or is the cat really urine marking? So both males and females urine mark, much to a lot of people's surprise. They think it's just a male behavior, but both males and females do urine mark, and also both spayed and neutered cats still can urine mark. And so a lot of misperceptions about urine marking out there. Now, the initiating stimuli for urine marking can be a bunch of things. We'll start with talking about some of the kitty problems. So urine marking can happen when there's conflict between resident cats. It can happen when you bring a new cat into a home. It can happen because of the sight, sound, and smell of outdoor cats, neighborhood cats, feral cats, stray cats roaming around in the yard. And it certainly can also be triggered by overcrowding. Basically, if you have more than 10 cats in your house, you're probably going to have some urine marking, unless you live in a big mansion and every cat has his own wing, because that overcrowding can lead to social anxiety, which can lead to territorial marking behavior. But, anxiety about anything can actually trigger marking behavior. So it doesn't just have to be about another cat. If you have a change in routine, of course, now with COVID, we have all this change in routine, people being home more, and then eventually they're going to be going back to work. Punishment can lead to anxiety. Punishment in cats is really not recommended because all it does is lead to anxiety. Again, introduction of a new pet, not only another cat, but perhaps a dog. Something new in the environment, like a couch. You bring a new sofa in, smells funny, makes the cat anxious, cat urine marks on it. Or someone new in the environment, like a new boyfriend moves in. And so, anything new or changing can cause anxiety with cats. Cats are very routine oriented. They do not like change. So how do we treat urine marking? Well, first of all, if the cat is not neutered, we have to neuter the cat. Not very many people have unneutered male cats in their home, but unneutered male cats will 100% urine mark or spray. Okay, and so if the cat is unneutered, that's the first thing. But again, as I said before, even spayed and neutered cats will spray. We want to make sure we cleaned all the marked areas with a good enzymatic cleaner. My favorite is anti-icky poo, but it has to be neutralized so the cat doesn't keep marking where he or she smells their own marks. We want to then restrict access to that area because usually there's a specific area where cats will urine mark. So once we neutralize it, we got to kind of restrict access to that area. We want to reduce visual access to outdoor cats if that could be what is precipitating the marking behavior. And so there's a couple different products like the Garden Ghost, which is a can of compressed air with a motion detector on top you can stick in your garden, or the Scarecrow, which is a motion detector you put on a hose. Those two things can help deter cats from coming into your neighborhood or your property. You want to improve the association with the new pet if it was a new pet triggering the spraying. Improve the relationship with the bad person. If the new boyfriend, the cat doesn't really dig the new boyfriend has to feed the cat, play with the cat, be nice to the cat. And of course, we want to stop all punishment because punishment leads to anxiety. Anxiety can lead to marking. We can also put the product Feel Away into the environment, which can help reduce anxiety in cats. The Feel Away is a synthetic version of the facial pheromone that cats emit when they're calm, comfortable, and feeling affiliative. It's another marking strategy cats have, marking with their facial glands. So when we put this pheromone into the environment, that can oftentimes reduce urine marking. Now, chronic urine marking that's not easily resolved can be helped by anti-anxiety medication. So I've had many cases over the years where we actually had to put the cat on some anti-anxiety medication because nothing else helped. Okay, now let's talk about aggression to humans. Now, the thing about this is that there's all different kinds of aggressive behavior, and so we have to identify why the cat is being aggressive. The first one we talk about is play aggression. And so we got to remember that cats are predators and their play simulates aspects of the hunt: stalk, chase, pounce, and grab, and bite, right? And so oftentimes, if you're moving your toes under the covers or playing with the cat with your hands, that is going to trigger that play aggression. So the cat is not being mean, the cat is just playing, and that's how cats play. So how do we treat play aggression? We treat it with play therapy. What that means is we have a good vigorous play session with our cat at least once a day to get that play energy out using a feather dancer or a laser pointer or any other kind of toy that your cat really likes. You can also redirect the attack onto a toy. So if you know the cat always nails you when you walk past a certain dresser, get ready with a ball and throw that ball in the opposite direction. Try to redirect that cat's attack. We also see cats showing aggressive behavior when they're afraid. And so, this defensive aggression can occur whenever a cat feels afraid. So it's really important as people learn the body language that tells you the cat is afraid, when their ears go back, their pupils dilate or get big, their tail tucks, their body tucks, they hiss, spit, growl, the cat is afraid. And so the treatment for fear aggression is going to be to stop any interactions that's making the cat afraid, like rough handling or physical punishment. People have to recognize that they're scaring their cat. And when they recognize the body language that the cat is feeling afraid, feeling cornered, feeling vulnerable, they just need to stop trying to interact with that cat. Now, if the scary thing can be identified, like nail trims, you can work to desensitize the cat to having their nails trimmed by going really slow and pairing that event with something really positive, like treats or play. So if we can identify the fearful trigger, we can work to make it better. But mainly we have to let people know that when cats are afraid, they can trigger to the fight response, which is aggressive behavior. So we have to recognize what scares the cat and what the cat looks like when they're afraid so we can not interact with them and get bitten and scratched. Petting-induced aggression, excuse me. There's a couple reasons why cats show this. Number one, some cats have a low threshold for physical touch. 3 pets are okay, but the 4th one reaches that threshold. Sometimes it's a buildup of static electricity in their hair coat. And so as you're petting, you might not feel the spark, but the cat can feel it in there. And then sometimes it's about touching an off-limit area like a cat's belly. And so the treatment for petting-induced aggression, number one, respect the cat's petting limits. If you know on the 4th pet you get nailed, don't pet the cat 4 times. Respect the cat's petting preferences. Don't pet them on their belly. And of course, again, learn the signals that tell you the cat is agitated, like their ears go back or to the side, their tail starts twitching. Stop petting when the cat is starting to get agitated. Another form of aggression we see in cats is redirected aggression. So agitated cats can redirect their negative feelings about one thing onto another thing. So a cat gets upset about a cat outside and you go to pet the cat and he bites you instead. So the treatment for redirected aggression, learn to recognize when the cat's agitated and stay away. And I know I keep saying the same thing, but it's really super important that people recognize when their cat is afraid or agitated. So learning the cat body language is critical. When the ears go back or to the side, it tells you the cat is afraid or agitated. When those pupils dilate or get really big, it tells you that cat is really afraid. When the tail starts swishing, that tells you the cat is agitated. When the hair on their back starts twitching, that tells you the cat's agitated. So we have to learn these signals, and we have to teach them to our adopters. All right, now let's talk about aggressive behavior to other cats. Another common problem, especially when people adopt a cat, bring it into a home, and we oftentimes have this problem. Now, cats can live socially, but they're really particular about their social partners. They prefer the company of their relatives, but they don't always have to be related. I have 4 cats unrelated. They love each other, but sometimes that is not always the case. So when there's aggression to a new cat, it could be because that new cat is perceived as an intruder into the territory. Or maybe you got a kitten, or the adopter adopted a kitten and it's too playful for an older cat. Cat can't deal with it. And sometimes we just have a mismatched personality. Sometimes cats just don't get along. We can also see sudden aggression between housemates. So they always got along fine and suddenly they're fighting. Oftentimes this is triggered by that redirected aggression. So one cat sitting in the window sees the neighborhood cat, the other cat jumps up and then gets attacked from a redirected attack, and that causes this animosity between them and they start fighting. Sometimes it's because one cat is sick and either is acting funny or smells funny. Speaking of smell, sometimes when you take one cat to the veterinarian and bring it home, the other cat attacks the cat because he really doesn't smell the same anymore. Smell is really important to cats, and they recognize their social partners by smell. When they smell different, that's stressful. So how do we resolve housemate issues? All right, we do a reintroduction program. If the person who brought a new cat into the home didn't do this to start, we got to do it over again, or start it this way. Or if 2 cats that always lived fine together are now fighting, we have to go ahead and do a reintroduction program. So we put one cat in his own room, set up with everything he needs. The other one's roaming free in the house. We do daily scent exchange, pet each cat with a sock and leave that sock into the other cat's room just so they can get reacquainted with the smell of each other. And switch places occasionally, put the other cat in that room and put, just switch places so they get to know each other's scent and get reacquainted. Step 2 is allow safe visual access through a baby gate or a screen door, and lots of positive association, having a dish of tuna on either side of the gate so the cats start realizing that they get this special treat when they see each other. And then step 3 would be supervised short visits with lots of treats. So putting treats or dishes of tuna fish out that can help form a more positive association between the cats. And that can be really helpful. The feel away synthetic version of the facial pheromone, again, that's cats emit when they're calm and comfortable, can also help situations where the cat is showing aggressive behavior to a housemate. And also really super important is providing an environment of plenty, making sure that the resources are plentiful and they're spread around the environment. Several feeding stations, water stations, litter stations, hiding places, escape routes, and lots of enrichment, because we want to make sure there's enough of everything for each cat that can really help with those kind of issues. We never want to punish a cat who's being aggressive to another cat because that's going to just create a more negative association between the cats. Also, when you punish the aggressor, you're probably going to inadvertently punish the victim. So punishment really is never okay with cats. It usually backfires on you. Sometimes the best we can hope for is mutual avoidance, an occasional spat, little hissy fit. But when fights are severe or relentless, or certainly when they're injurious, it's often necessary to rehome one of the cats. And so a lot of times we can make this stuff work, even though they won't be best friends, but sometimes it's just not going to work. Okay, now let's jump into the common problematic behaviors in dogs. And these are all the things I covered in part 1. So again, if you missed that one, it is on the Assisi website. I would encourage you to watch it. But the two challenging issues we see in shelter dogs that I want to talk about today, extreme fearfulness and leash reactivity, okay, because these are very common. So we'll start with extreme fearfulness. Many shelters take in dogs from situations that are less than ideal for the dog. You know, abuse cases, hoarding cases, puppy mill raids, and even just transports from other parts of the country. And so we can see extreme fearfulness in some of these dogs because of their past. Now, many of these dogs are extremely fearful as a result of a lack of socialization and or a negative experience or negative experiences. And so it could be either, it could be both. And so sometimes we don't know, sometimes we do. Like if it comes from a hoarding case, we know the dog wasn't socialized well. If it comes from an abuse case, we know the dog had a negative association with a human. And so sometimes we do know. But these dogs have never experienced a fraction of the things that they are expected to handle in the average pet home. So we have to do careful adoptions with these fearful dogs because these dogs really are not for everyone. So the adopters of these dogs need to understand fear. And so remember that fear is an adaptive emotion. That means it helps animals survive. And fear is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful emotion that can override all other things. And it is not something the animal can control. And so again, people put all human emotions on dogs all the time and expect them to do things the way humans do. But fear is just this intense emotion that really is out of the animal's control. And fear can trigger the fight or flight response. Remember, the flight response is run away, the fight response is become aggressive. Now that flight response can trigger with some of these fearful dogs, and sometimes they take off. And they can be gone for days or even weeks. So we got to be aware of that. If the dog is severely under-socialized and severely afraid, that can lead to that flight response. And the first chance the dog has, it takes off. Adopters need to understand that love alone will not fix the dog and it will not make him normal, okay? Some of these dogs are damaged for life because of what they missed out on or what they experienced. It's going to take a long time for a dog to get used to this new world. It could be months. It could even be years. So the adopters need to be told to take it very slowly, exposing the dog to people and events with patience, understanding, and lots of yummy treats. They also need to be able to recognize when their dog is afraid. So just like I said with the cat stuff, you have to teach people how to recognize body language and signaling that says the dog is afraid. Because if they don't recognize their dog is afraid, they might be putting the dog into a situation that the dog can't handle, and that could trigger that fight or fight response. Now, there's a lot of great little fun handouts that teach people about body language. So Dr. Sophia Yin's website has a lot of these handouts. They're free. You can download them. You can hand them out. And so like this one talks about, the body language when a dog is afraid, especially things that are subtle, like licking lips and panting, things that the average pet owner might not recognize as fear. Really important that you try to educate your adopters of the fearful dogs, as well as yourselves, how to recognize fear, how to recognize the signaling that means, oh my God, I'm in a bad place. You got to teach them what behaviors can stem from fear. So hiding, escaping. Destruction actually can be fear when a dog is panicking. Trembling, salivation, involuntary elimination, hypervigilance, that's where the dog is looking around, vocalizations like whining and things like that, panting, pacing, and even aggressive behavior. All these behaviors can stem from fear. So people need to understand that. You also have to be very careful with your own advice, right? So lots of bad advice is given out in the past and still. For one, telling the adopter not to reinforce the fear by coddling the dog is really, really bad advice, right? Fear is an emotion, and it stems from the limbic system of the brain, which is the emotional center of the brain, not the cognitive part of the brain where dogs learn, but the emotional part of the brain. And so you can't reinforce an emotion, right? So it's an emotion, it's there. So you coddling the dog doesn't make it worse. Here's my human analogy. If you're afraid of flying and you're on an airplane and your seat partner comforts you and holds your hands and tells you, it's okay, does that make you more fearful or does it make you feel better? Of course, it makes you feel better because when you're that afraid, that rationale, the cognitive part of our brain isn't working, and it certainly isn't working for dogs either. So fearful dogs need comfort, support, and protection. And so it's really important to tell the adopters that. Now, many of these dogs are extremely fearful of people, but they do bond to one person pretty quickly because dogs are social animals and they do need some kind of a social bond. It can take them longer to warm up to other members of the family, especially men. No offense to the men out there, but dogs tend to be more afraid of men unless they have direct abuse from a woman, just because, you're bigger and your voice is deeper and, it's no offense to you and don't take it from the dog. But most of them eventually become comfortable with the people in their home. It might take a little bit longer with the men in the home. But once they bond to that family and that home, sometimes what we see is their fear and lack of socialization drives them to act aggressively now to strangers who invade their safety zone. All right, so this can happen. So we got to talk about the behavior modification for fear. So again, explain to the adopter the concept of systematic desensitization and counterconditioning. So here's some definitions of those two behavior modification techniques. Systematic desensitization is exposing the dog to the scary stimulus at a low level, like using distance or intensity, and gradually increasing the stimulus strength over time so that the dog learns to accept it without fear. Counterconditioning means changing the emotional response to the scary stimulus from negative to positive by pairing the stimulus with something the dog loves. Typically, we use really yummy food. So here's a nice, just cute depiction of what counterconditioning is. Dog is afraid of or reactive to, something. We pair that stimulus with meat. Pretty soon, through Pavlovian conditioning, the scary thing predicts meat, which means the scary thing is not so bad. So counterconditioning to visitors and strangers. We want all visitors and strangers to predict great things like really yummy treat. I like to use meat or cheese. But the treat should come from the owner, not the unknown person, at least at first. So the treats come from the trusted person in association with the stranger. The visitors and strangers shouldn't force themselves on the dog. In fact, they should ignore the dog until that dog is more comfortable. And when the dog seems more comfortable, then the unknown person can start tossing treats. And eventually, very slowly, we get to the step where the dog can try to eat the treats out of the stranger's hand. It is a progression, however, and you have to use that progression. If the stranger's standing there holding the piece of meat, it puts that dog in conflict. I want the meat, but that person's scary. I don't know what to do. We don't want to add more conflict to a scared dog. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about, I know I'm speeding through this, but a half hour goes very fast, is on-leash reactivity. And this was actually requested from part 1, and I'm glad to talk about it because it is so common. Now, many dogs become overly reactive, barking and lunging at the sight of other dogs when they're restrained by a leash. All right, this behavior stems from frustration. So it's a barrier frustration behavior. Yes, there are dogs that are dog aggressive. I'm not talking about those dogs. These dogs are totally fine in play group. They're totally fine. But on a leash, they are super leash reactive. And so it's leash frustration. So because you walk the dogs every day, you should get started with the behavior modification prior to adoption. And then you show the adopter what to do. Okay. So let's talk about how do we modify this behavior. Well, this is how I've been doing it for over 20 years, both with shelter dogs as well as own dogs. And it works really, really well. Number one, we have to humanely suppress the reactivity so that it doesn't continue to be reinforcing to the dog. Remember, reinforced behaviors will never go away. And so reactivity is actually self-reinforcing because the dog just feels he needs to do it. Plus he gets that surge of adrenaline when he's doing it. There's internal reinforcement. So every time the dog displays the behavior, it makes the next incident of the behavior more likely to happen. And every time they display the behavior and get reinforced for it, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And then step two is systematic desensitization and positive counterconditioning. So how do we suppress the reactivity? Well, what I have used over the years is a head halter. A head halter is a humane tool that allows you to suppress the reactivity without causing pain. This is really important. A head halter just uses pressure, not pain. But what's really super duper important with a head halter, because dogs don't typically like them, is you have to fit it properly, which most people do not. The nose loop should be loose, the neck loop should be tight, and then you have to desensitize the dog to wear the head halter. We start by just having them stick their nose into the nose loop to get the treat, and eventually we put the head halter on and let them lick a peanut butter spoon. And so the nerves in their face start desensitizing to the feel of the gentle leader, or whatever head halter you use. I typically use the gentle leader. Pressure, sit. Once she sits, pressure off. Oh. So Jean Donaldson displaying here how we use that head halter to suppress the reactive behavior. It's very simple. If the dog lunges forward, we have his head, we can bring him back around. If he starts barking, we can just lift up gently, close that mouth. As soon as the dog calms down, we release all the tension. Okay, and so the idea is we don't allow the dog to have that full-blown reaction, which is super important because, again, it's a self-rewarding behavior. But we don't want a shock collar, choke chain, all that stuff that causes pain. The gentle leader, when the dog is desensitized to wearing it, all it is just a little pressure telling you, you know what, that's not the right thing right now. And then what we do is positive counterconditioning. We want to reward non-reactivity in the presence of other dogs. So I'm going to show you a short session on how we do this. Now, I use a clicker for a marker signal. For all those people who know clicker training, clicker is just a marker signal. It says you just earned a reward. And so in this video, I'll let you watch it and then I can talk about it. Dog enters. The dog we're working with, every time he looks at the dog and doesn't have a negative reaction, he hears the magic click and he gets the treat. So what we're doing with the combination is the head halter's there so that we can suppress any reactivity, so the dog doesn't continue to get rewarded for that. And then we just pour on the reinforcement for non-reactivity. We're shaping the absence of reactivity, basically. And so again, the clicker is a really nice marker signal. You can use a word, you can use any sound, but the idea of a marker signal is it tells the dog exactly what they're earning the reward for. So when the dog looks at the other dog without reacting, click, treat. The click says you just earned a treat. But again, you can use a word or a little noise click with your tongue or whatever. A marker signal helps though. But the whole idea is we want to teach the dog, don't react negatively when you see another dog on leash. You'll get rewarded if you don't. And what happens there is we do Pavlovian conditioning, which is other dogs predict treats. I really like other dogs, okay? Plus operant conditioning, which is, rewarding the behavior we like. We like when you are not reactive, we're going to reward you for that. And so this technique is doing both Pavlovian and operant conditioning. And again, you know, repetition is really important. And this is how we work with that particular behavior problem. So adoption counseling for these dogs, you got to explain the dog's reactivity, explain why you've been using a head halter to manage that behavior, show the adopter how to put it on the dog and how to use it properly, and send the dog home with their head halter, right? And then, you know, demonstrate how to reward non-reactivity. And again, with adopters, we usually just tell them to say yes and give the dog a treat, okay, rather than getting them all involved in the clicker and all that stuff. Okay, so that was it. I know, again, super fast. These half-hour webinars are really fun, but they go like by in a second. So that's the end of this part 2 of common behavior problems in dogs and cats. I hope you've learned a lot. Again, I thank Assisi for asking me to do these webinars, webbies, and I thank you guys for tuning in today. This is my email, Kelley@kelleybollen.com. Feel free to email me if you have any questions, and my website, kelleybollen.com. Check me out, see what I can do for your shelter.